Dang lika dang, dang lika dang, dang dang. Welcome back. This is my second channel now, not second channel, but my second kind of topic that I'm talking about. We're going to talk a little bit about Chinese impoliteness and rudeness. Okay, so while this doesn't apply to every single Chinese person, it applies to a fair amount. Okay, some things I want to just indicate before we start talking about some major topics here is there's a couple of things that Chinese people really, what we find rude, they find rude themselves. Okay, not just a complete culture difference here, and those would be people, cutting the line, as it were, and kind of you're in a straight line and you find someone in the back that wants to come in that you didn't really see at first, and they kind of get in there. Another thing is when people spit on the streets. Okay, that's something that's common there. They just do it whenever they feel like it. Okay, that's common. The other thing is when they're eating, they might slurp the soup, right? As for them, that means it's delicious, okay? But for other people, they might find that rude, right? The other thing is putting all the bones that they've eaten off the meat on the table, and it looks like a mess. People don't really appreciate that. Okay, so those are just a few things that Chinese people find rude themselves, but they still do sometimes. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about things that we find rude as Americans or foreigners, but Chinese people don't necessarily know that themselves. They haven't really figured out that this is kind of a problem. This is more of a culture difference between a foreign country and China. The first thing is, and I'm talking more in terms of the U.S. since I was born here, but this probably applies to other countries as well. So we tend to be friendlier to strangers than Chinese people might be. We're obviously friendly to our close friends, but we tend to be also quite friendly to strangers and people we don't know. So we might, when we're walking in the park or wherever we're going, we might smile and say, "Hey, how's your day going?" And that's about it. We don't really have a huge conversation with them, but we might, give them a little smile and have a tiny conversation, and that's normal. They find that okay. In China, it's not a thing there, right? If you do that, they might think, oh, have I seen this person somewhere? Or is there something on my face that I look strange, that they're laughing at me almost? So they're not used to people smiling at them. Okay, so I wouldn't do that if you don't know the person personally when you're walking in the street. So do not smile or say, how are you doing, unless you know this person. That's not common. And as well, other than smiling, you probably shouldn't wave your hand saying hi. Okay, that's one of the first things. The other thing is, and this is something I've noticed, and for Chinese people, this is like totally normal, but for us it's not. So when we're usually let's say getting out of a classroom, when class is over, or wherever in a grocery store, people usually look behind them when they open a door to see if there's anyone there. Okay, they wouldn't just open the door and then leave. So it's very common that it's something polite we do, so that, let's say someone's carrying a lot of bags, they don't have to worry about also holding the door. Okay, so we want to make sure that that's something we know that's not common there. In China, they do not look behind them for people. They just go in and that's it. The other thing is when you're, let's say you're crossing the street. Okay, cars might be moving and it's a red light. Sometimes here, let's say in New York or big cities, some streets do not usually have cars on them. So you might just, walk across the street, even though it's not quite that walk sign yet. That's okay, but, right? And even if it's not and there's a car coming, they might still let you go, just because that's kind of the custom here. But in China, you probably don't want to do that, because cars will not wait for you. If you cross the street before it's a walk sign, you might get run over. So please be careful and do not do that. Always wait for the walking sign to cross the street. That's something very, very important for your safety and just something that you can kind of keep in mind while you're there. The other thing is that, so while you might, this kind of applies to when I was talking about you not smiling or saying hi to someone that is a stranger. So here I'm talking more about the idea of you might in China it's common, right? If you open a door for someone or you give someone a cup of coffee or some water or like a little dessert, someone that you're not so close with, they'll probably say thanks, and that's normal, right? But if you're really close to if you have a really good relationship with your friend, or let's say it's your best friend, a colleague, and you do that, right? We're not talking about things that are like really important here. We're talking about just tiny little favors that you've done for someone, okay? So again, open the door, maybe move the desk a little bit over so they have more room to stretch their legs and whatnot. Give them a cup of water. If they say thanks, that's a little bit, it's a little bit weird because they're not used to hearing that. If they don't say anything, that's completely normal, okay? So the friendship they have is close enough that they don't have to do that. With strangers, that's okay. You might hear a thank you. So that's it for today. I went over a couple of things here. We have that in China that they don't, they're not really used to smiling too much or saying hi to strangers. Here we have another walking on this street. We want to make sure that we cross the road when there's a walk sign and not when it's a stop sign. Thinking there's no cars, we want to make sure that we're safe before we cross because the cars will not wait for us. Thanks a lot. 谢谢.